construction of this dry stone wall. We're ready to add some concrete on the back of them. I'm using the concrete with pigment in it. I agitate this first batch thoroughly. Here you can see how I've added a piece of scrap concrete at the back of this large cornerstone. Once I'm satisfied it's sitting firmly at the right height,
close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder, shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
Today we're going to be continuing on with the construction of this dry stone wall. This wall is a continuation on a theme of a wall we built in the previous project on the side of the staircase under the deck. With the first course of our stones in this wall, we're ready to add some concrete on the back of them. When I'm building these dry stone walls, I have two things to think about. One is the strength of the wall, and the other one is the looks of the wall. So with that in mind, I have two batches of concrete mix that I use to assemble this wall. One batch has pigment in it, so it doesn't show up as ugly grey concrete, and the other batch is just standard concrete mix for the strength of the wall. I'm using the concrete with pigment in it to start off the system. This is to help lock in the bottom edge of the stone to the concrete. The coloured batch of concrete also has a bondcrete additive in it to help it stick to the stone and the previously poured foundation. I also add 1 shovel load of mortar in there to add more sand into the mix. This helps it penetrate through the cracks in the nooks and crannies and gives us a really tight construction bond to the whole system. I agitate this first batch thoroughly under the bottom of the stones to get a really good adhesion between the bottom of the rock and the foundation we previously poured. The small thin trowel is really effective at pushing the concrete into the small cracks, and my regular trowel is good for moving the volume of concrete around. Here I'm using my trowel to push the concrete in the very bottom of the stone where it contacts our foundation. I continue adding the coloured concrete all the way along our wall length. This concrete mix is a lot wetter than I'd normally have concrete, but we want the wetness in this batch to help it penetrate all these cracks between our stones. It's important to take our time to work the concrete into all these nooks and crannies and be extra careful not to bump our stones out of alignment. I'm gently going back and forth to push this concrete under the bottom of these stones. I'm periodically checking for concrete spills on the stone and cleaning them off with my sponge when I find them.
Once we've put our pigmented concrete in the first batch, we're just going to push up through all the cracks that might be exposed when we pull our form off later. Our next batch of concrete's just regular mix without the pigment in it because it's never going to be seen. It's just to fill the back of it with volume.
I take extra care when pouring in the backfill concrete not to bump the stones on the front. It helps to have relatively small amounts of concrete in our tubs to pour out, as this makes it easier to manage it without bumping our stones. The idea with the grey concrete is to not push it into the cracks of the stones, but to scrape it up against the back of the stones to get a really good engineering contact for the strength of the wall. By working from one end of the wall to the other, I can get really even coverage of this backfill concrete. Here you can see how I've added a piece of scrap concrete at the back of this large cornerstone. I'm just making sure I get a good bed of concrete between the recycled concrete and the pink granite stone. This will help it bond together and create the engineering strength we need for this wall. I use my trowel to pick the concrete up and drop it in between the gap of the recycled concrete and our pink granite. I'm working slowly and extra carefully because it's really important we don't bump our stones out of alignment whilst adding this concrete.
We just continue to work the concrete through all these nooks and crannies so we get a nice solid fit.
With our process moving along nicely, I like to slow down a little bit and get really present with what I'm doing. It's going to help us do a really thorough job. And I also want to enjoy this process. Making stone walls is a lot of fun. As the concrete gets close to the top of our timber form, I constantly top up the cracks and voids with our gravel chips to keep the concrete hidden in the final process. I continue to add batches of our grey concrete mix. I need the backfill concrete to get up to the height of our timber retaining wall piece, because once we've filled it high enough, we can add some more stones along the top of our wall. Once I'm satisfied a stone's going to fit one of the voids by test fitting it, I add a bit of our pigmented concrete to help lock it in. Once I'm satisfied it's sitting firmly at the right height, I backfill it with a little more of the pigmented concrete. I constantly add gravel chips in this process to stop the concrete from coming all the way through to the front of our formwork. I gently agitate the concrete mix into the cracks between these stones. The idea here is we're trying to fill the gaps between the larger stones with smaller stones to bring everything up to a flat height that matches our formwork on the front of this wall. You need a little patience in finding the stones that are going to fit these gaps. Here I've found one that fits really nicely. With a little bit of adjustment with the concrete mix and maybe topping it up with a little bit to give it a bit of bedding, we squeeze it in between the gap. Once I've filled these gaps, I can add more concrete into the backfill.
I'm so tired of calling your phone. I wanna see you face to face. We can go anywhere that you want. Don't have to see it my way. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. Oh, oh. I'm coming home. It's been so long. You don't have to meet me halfway. I'm so tired of calling your phone. I wanna see you face to face. We can go anywhere that you want. You don't have to see it my way. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. Oh, oh. I'm coming home. I'm coming home.
Once we've backfilled enough concrete to get up to the height of our timber retaining plank, we can add more stones on top. In this case, I've added a couple of pieces above our retaining wall. But as long as they're in line with the flat front of our wall, it'll all work out. I'm continuing the same system we've used for all the stones in this wall, which is to get them as close and tight as possible and then backfill them with concrete to lock them in. This completes the first course of this dry stone wall. The concrete needs time to set properly before we add another form timber and continue the building of this wall. While we're waiting for the concrete to set in the wall, we're going to carry on with our staircase project, where we're going to be building a retaining wall out of our treated timber sleepers that's part of the structure of this terrace rock garden that wraps around this blood orange tree. I have to excavate some dirt from the side of this shed. We'll be starting this treated timber retaining wall along this shed line, so we've got to remove enough dirt out of the way to be able to fit the first sleeper in. The dirt's coming out pretty easily on this excavation, but as usual we've run into some roots. The mattock is the best tool to blow these roots out of the way. Our sleeper's 200mm thick, so the idea is to get this trench down at least 200mm and then we'll have room to pack up our sleeper to get it level. With this trench complete, we're going to move on to the timber work. We're starting off this structure with a cross beam and a riser. The cross beam runs along the bottom of the shed edge, and the riser is the same height as our 4 steps. When this frame's complete, it'll create the whole outline of this terraced garden area. With the 2 main pieces attached together and square, I need to get this top rail plumb and level. It takes a bit of adjustment and going back and forth. I'm having to pack the far end up with some dirt to get it level. Once I'm satisfied that the whole system's level and plumb, I'm going to lock it in temporarily to this picket that happens to already be here on the side. I've had to add a temporary timber wedge to get the riser sitting completely vertical. I'm now going to secure the top end to keep the whole structure solid. I'm using a small block of treated timber to attach it to the garden edge that we'd built on the previous project. You'll always see me drilling pilot holes before I put screws in. It's especially important when you're trying to put a screw in on an angle, because by drilling the pilot hole, it'll stop the timber moving around when you put the screw through. Join me on the next episode as we continue the foundation structure of this staircase and garden bed stone wall.
Flashing signs and neon lights couldn't know me like you do, but I miss you.
These chickens really love it when they dig up some dirt, because they get all the worms and bugs inside the dirt.
I'm so tired of calling your phone. I wanna see you face to face. We can go anywhere that you want. You don't have to see it my way.
Thanks for joining me this week on my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.